All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this month's Community Impact Briefing. We're just going to give everyone a few minutes to join, and then we'll get started. All right, looks like attendees have started slowing down, so let's get started. Again, welcome everyone to NCST's March Community Impact Briefing. I'm Jordan Stanley, and on behalf of myself and my colleagues, we're looking forward to an excellent webinar today. We have a fantastic speaker, and as usual, we will share our policy update towards the end of the webinar. So as a reminder, everyone's on mute. There will be a Q&A after the presentation, so feel free to engage with us using the Q&A function or simply by asking questions in the chat. We want to hear from you. Finally, this webinar is being recorded, and we will circulate that recording in a follow-up email later this week. With that, I'm happy to turn over the mic to my colleague, Chris Garland, who will introduce our speaker today.
Thanks, Jordan, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Hopefully, everyone's adjusting well after adjusting your clocks over the weekend and springing forward. I can tell you it's a beautiful day, beautiful spring day here in sunny Cleveland, Ohio. Again, my name is Chris Garland. I serve on our community development team, and on behalf of all of us at NCST, thanks for joining our monthly community impact briefing. Today's presentation focuses on a topic that many of our partners throughout the country have been tackling on a local level and also is a central priority on a federal level, namely addressing disparities in overall declining rates in home ownership for Black households. Following today's presentation and also some time for Q&A, NCST President Juliette Gordon will join us for a policy update as well as some important remarks. So I encourage you all to stay for that portion if you're able. Our presenter today is Yuju Park. Yuju is a Housing Solutions Lab Technical Assistance Manager at the NYU Furman Center. Before joining the lab, Yuju worked in affordable housing advocacy in Silicon Valley and also conducted research with UC Berkeley's Turner Center for Housing Innovation and the Center for Community Innovation. Prior to that, she worked as a research analyst at the Urban Institute on projects focused on child welfare and community and economic development. Yuju received a BA in sociology from Bryn Mawr College and a Master of City Planning from UC Berkeley. Her research interests include alternative homeownership models, social and public housing, and intersections between housing and transportation policy. In today's presentation titled Black Homeownership Trends in Small and Mid-Sized Cities, Yuju Park will touch on policy responses around Black homeownership, the overall lack of affordable housing developers in small communities, foreclosure prevention, and also innovative ways that cities are increasing housing production and preservation. So with that, Yuju Park, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Jordan and Chris. I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. My name is Yuju Park. I'm the Technical Assistance Manager at the Housing Solutions Lab at the NYU Furman Center. And today I'll be sharing our research on Black homeownership trends in small to mid-sized cities. To just go over a roadmap of what I'll be covering in this webinar, I'll start off by introducing who we are at the Housing Solutions Lab and what we do, then talk and go into our research about Black homeownership trends in small to mid-sized cities and how cities can be responding accordingly, so what the policy responses look like. And then I will end with how you can continue to engage with the lab and how we can be of assistance on this topic, and then I will open it up for questions. So to introduce the Housing Solutions Lab, we are an interdisciplinary team based at the NYU Furman Center. We really focus on supporting local policies that advance racial equity, increase access to opportunity, and improve health and well-being outcomes. We do a range of activities. As you can see on the right, we have a 5 multi-pronged approach. We do everything from cultivating direct partnerships, to doing research and evaluation, some of which I'll be presenting today. We disseminate that research, and we also run a peer network learning opportunity where we have a cohort of city leaders every year that work on housing policy issues, and they can learn from each other nationally. And lastly, we have training and technical assistance, which is the area that I cover, where we connect cities to different resources and other more specialized technical assistance providers, and whatever questions that may have, we also do one-on-one sessions with them. We also focus primarily on small and mid-sized cities, as you can see also with the research we're presenting today. We know a lot of the focus traditionally is on large coastal cities, but we do think that small and mid-sized cities have a lot of opportunity for innovation in terms of housing policy. They have their own complex housing challenges and complexities, and we think it's ripe for innovation because there's more opportunities to engage with leadership at a higher level. There may be less bureaucracy in small to mid-sized cities, and more opportunities for engagement with the local community. So that's the Housing Solutions Lab. And to dive into our research on Black homeownership trends in small to mid-sized cities, we used census data between 2000 and 2019 to analyze small to mid-sized cities. And at the lab, we define small to mid-sized cities as having a population of 50,000 to 500,000. And so we examined cities where Black homeownership rates declined between 2000 and 2019, and we found that those cities have larger Black-white homeownership gaps than larger coastal cities. So it's about 8.1% higher in small to mid-sized cities. And when we looked at the overall decline in Black homeownership rates, we really looked at we really split it up into two categories of cities where Black homeownership rates declined, but the number of Black homeowners decreased, and then Black homeownership rates declined, but the number of Black homeowners increased. So there were two types of trends that we really wanted to focus on. And so we found that on average, when we looked at different races across cities of all sizes, with small to mid-sized cities and large cities, homeownership rates increased for Hispanic and Asian households, but declined for Black households. And Hispanic households saw a larger increase in home ownership rates in large cities than in small to mid-sized cities, whereas Black home ownership rates declined in a majority of small to mid-sized cities. So that was around 73.4%. The lab also did a separate project for Wells Fargo's Black Indigenous People of Color initiative. This was a separate research project, but we conducted data work in 15 different cities. And for this research, we used data from the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. And we just wanted to highlight these findings as supporting this research that we did using census data, in that Black homeownership rates were the lowest among all racial and ethnic groups. Mortgage denial rates tended to be the highest for Black applicants, and owner-occupied Black households also tended to be the most cost burdened. So we thought this was important to really add on to the narrative that we're sharing today. And then going into the census research again, we found that of the small to mid-sized cities that we looked at, about a third, so 28% of small to mid-sized cities experienced declines in both Black homeownership rates and the number of Black households. And some examples of these cities included Tampa, Florida, Tacoma, Washington, and Lansing, Michigan. We found that these were actually slower growing cities, and also found that the weighted median Black household income and overall Black population declined significantly as well. And we think that these trends potentially could be linked to broad economic factors of limited opportunity for employment for the Black community as well. On the other hand, we found that nearly half of the small to mid-sized cities, around 46%, experienced a net increase of Black homeowners despite having a decline in Black homeownership rates. And some of these cities included Cary, North Carolina, Plano, Texas, Reno, Nevada. And these were more rapidly growing cities with a growing Black population. And we found that these cities had a more affordable housing stock, and the weighted median Black household income was higher than the small to mid-sized average in 2019. And we also found that these were more likely to be suburban cities. This is a screenshot of one of our interactive maps on our website. The blog link is down below on the screen, and that's where you can find a summary of everything that I'm presenting to you today. But in this map on our website, you'll be able to click through and search any small to mid-sized city and see what the Black ownership rates and the number of Black homeowners look like in that community. This one is highlighted for Mansfield City, Texas. And so this is a small to mid-sized city outside of Dallas. And so you'll see that here they experienced over 2,000 Black, again, in over 2,000 Black homeowners while experiencing a double-digit decline in Black homeownership rates. And so, while this is a big improvement, this is an example that there's the need for policies to promote equitable growth, policies that ensure equal access to Black homeownership across all racial and ethnic groups. And Mansfield, Texas was actually, these had similar patterns to other small to mid-sized cities outside of major cities like Houston and Austin in Texas. And if you go on the map online at this link, you'll be able to explore and click through that as well. And so obviously the policy response will look really different for cities losing Black homeowners as part of a broader economic decline versus for cities gaining Black homeowners with that rapid population growth. So for cities losing Black homeowners, it's really important for cities to prioritize policies and programs that maintain housing affordability over time. So some of these practices and policies include things like foreclosure prevention programs, which really became popular after the 2008 recession, short-term mortgage assistance programs. We saw a lot of this in the onset of COVID 2 years ago. And then grants to homeowners for rehabilitation and home repair assistance, especially if homeowners can't afford to keep upkeep of their house, to make sure that communities don't become blighted and deteriorated. Other initiatives such as deed restricted homeownership initiatives, community land trusts that have shared equity models, and then home purchase programs for foreclosed homes where tenants have the opportunity to purchase the home that might be going into foreclosure. So these are some examples, and just wanted to highlight a few cities that are doing some of these innovative practices. So for example, Portland, Oregon, they are doing a location specific strategy from their housing bureau. So for this program, they are strategically providing home retention programs, home repair loans, down payment grants to residents of North and Northeast neighborhood of Portland. And so for context, the North and Northeast neighborhood in Portland has the highest concentration of Black residents in all of Portland and also all of Oregon. So this is a way to really target this intervention and try to keep the people in place in this community. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, the city partially funds the City of Lakes Community Land Trust. And so for this land trust maintain housing affordability, providing sustainable home ownership opportunities through a shared equity model. And a third of the homeowners served by the CLT were Black residents, and about 50% were homeowners of color. Other examples for Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, they have a program funded by the city's Housing Opportunity Fund, HOF. And so this program launched a legal assistance program for foreclosure prevention, so providing legal services, and then also short-term mortgage assistance through funding. And then Rochester, New York, they have another model where they have a private-public partnership with something called Home Rochester, where they rehabilitate vacant homes and the city sells them off to low and moderate income households in exchange for the owner living in that residence for 15 years or more. So these are all strategies that cities can use to keep communities in place and to prevent the loss of any more Black homeowners. On the contrary, there are policies that can support equitable growth in rapidly growing cities. And so these would be policies and programs that build or rebuild pathways to home ownership. These include strategies such as down payment and closing cost financial assistance programs, education and counseling programs, and ways to increase access to favorable credit. I think oftentimes when we talk about home ownership, the importance of building credit is really important. That's a really big barrier for a lot of folks trying to purchase homes. And so these are all opportunities for cities to provide more equitable ways to make homeownership more accessible. I just wanted to highlight an example that Detroit, Michigan is doing. They have something called the Detroit Neighborhood Initiative, where buyers can qualify for a new mortgage program. So this program would have no down payment, they would have no fees. There's also payment available to rehabilitate that house in the future without the consideration of credit scores. And this is really important, again, because a lot of communities don't have access to good credit, which ruins, any opportunity for them to access equity through the purchase of a home. And then in San Diego, California, they have something called the San Diego Black Home Buyers Program. This is funded by a collection of foundations and the County of San Diego. So this is also private-public partnership in terms of funding. And this program provides down payment and closing cost assistance for eligible first-time home buyers. I did wanted to highlight that both of these cities are actually not small to mid-sized cities. These are larger cities. Detroit is around 600,000, so it is maybe a little bit between mid-size and large cities, but these programs are still an example of innovative programs that can be targeted towards Black homebuyer applicants. And we found that a lot of larger cities like San Diego, San Francisco, New York have programs that are more targeted towards Black homeowners or applicants for Black homeownership. And a lot of these other responses have just been just general, preservation strategies as well. But just wanted to include that and highlight that as an example that small to mid-sized cities can follow. And so to conclude, we just wanted to drive home the fact that after taking a deeper dive at the declining homeownership rates across most of the small to mid-sized cities, we just wanted to drive home the point that the overall rate needs to be broken down to understand the policy options and challenges better because the context looks so different. And even in cities where the number of Black households are increasing, Black-white homeownership gaps still persist. And we really do see through the data that cities have a lot more work to do towards eliminating racial disparities in access to homeownership. We did want to note that a quarter of small to mid-sized cities in our data did improve its both Black homeownership rate and the number of Black homeowners, but the Black-white gap remained larger than the Black homeownership rate was lower than the average for small to mid-sized cities in general in 2019. And then to conclude, I just wanted to highlight how the lab can continue to stay engaged on this topic. We have our website, localhousingsolutions.org. And this is a one-stop shop where any city leaders, stakeholders, whoever you are, can really access a whole portfolio of housing policies that cities can use. So that's our Housing 101. There are different ways that you can build a housing strategy. So we have menus and click downs for that. We have something really cool called the Housing Needs Assessment Tool, which isn't highlighted on this page, but that's a tool where you can enter any jurisdiction, again, that uses census data, and it'll generate a very, very large report of the housing stock characteristics, the demographics. You'll find the Black homeownership rates, other racial and ethnic demographics as well. And all of that is supposed to help cities guide their local housing strategies as well. And we also have case studies and different examples of how cities have been approaching their housing challenges. And so that is how we can continue to stay engaged. And I think I mentioned we also do technical assistance. And so there is this link called Ask the Lab that I have below. And so if you go to that link, you can ask any questions about a specific housing policy topic, and we would get back to you with any examples or connect you to any other cities that are doing innovative work, or connect you to any other technical assistance providers that may have very specific expertise in that area. And that is it, and I will open it up for any questions.
Wow, excellent. Yuju Park, thank you so much for sharing this important and frankly timely research from the lab. Yes, as you noted, I think we have some time for Q&A. And also, so I'm not remiss, please, Yuju, if, feel welcome to join us for the balance of our community impact briefing call today with remarks following today's Q&A session. I'll go ahead and cue it up. David Sanchez, our Director of Research and Development, noted that your research overlaps with the work of our Middle Neighborhoods Initiative and its focus in Black middle neighborhoods and legacy cities. So you mentioned a couple of them, certainly, but think St. Louis, Chicago, Cleveland, Baltimore. And in fact, what Middle Neighborhoods has found is that the recent Black homeowners are significantly more likely today to be buying homes in suburban rather than central city locations, and less likely to buy in predominantly African-American or racially mixed cities in their census tracts within those central cities. So I wonder if you could speak to this finding about homeownership movement within regions, either through your research or anecdotally.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think part of that could be because, homes in majority Black neighborhoods have chronically been devalued. It's always historically been a trend. And so that could be part of the reason why some Black home buyers are shifting to buying in more suburban areas. And I think it's also just because if they're buying in suburban cities, these do happen to be rapidly growing cities with more opportunity for employment. They do have newer housing stock as well. And so that could be part of that also. And I know I also didn't really touch on production strategies of how to address this disparity in racial disparities in homeownership. But I think another trend that we're seeing in a lot of cities is trying to rezone for a lot of missing middle housing to have ADUs and duplexes, triplexes, ways to have more diversity in different homeownership types. And so those could be in a lot more higher opportunity areas that may be suburban, so that may also play into that pattern.
Understood. Thank you. Jordan, I'm wondering if you've seen some questions come across.
Yes, I have. Krishna asked something in the Q&A. What are the characteristics of the cities where the Black home ownership rate and population increased? And why is the home ownership gap larger than it is in average small to mid-sized cities?
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Yes, absolutely. So what are the characteristics of the cities where Black homeownership rate and population increased?
Mm-hmm.
And then part two is, why is the homeownership gap larger than it is in average small to mid-sized cities?
We didn't focus too much on that because it was such a small portion, but I can definitely get back to you on that. We really just wanted to focus on the decline of Black homeownership rates for that one. So
fair enough. And we have some more questions coming into the Q&A. Christopher Norman asked, do you also track unemployment rates and income growth / declines as additional factors that might affect homeownership rates?
We do. And I think part of that, you can also, if you use this isn't part of our research for declining Black homeownership rates in small to mid-sized cities, but like I mentioned, if you go through our housing needs assessment data tool, you're able to pull that data of income and different employment opportunities and what that looks like, and compare that nationally, regionally, and with the city itself. But for all purposes of this research, we were limited to just median weighted Black household incomes.
Thank you for that insight. And it looks like we have one more question here from Rachel Meadows. Do you have any sense how investor buyers may be scooping up homes that would otherwise be purchased by Black and brown homeowners?
That's something we're working on now. Actually, we know that that's really gained a lot of national interest in recent, especially in the last 2 years, I feel like, but not quite ready to present about that yet.
Great.
It's definitely a starting point that we're hearing from many of our partners and communities throughout the country, Yuju, and so it'll be excellent to perhaps follow up with you at a future date on that.
Definitely, yeah.
And Rachel and others, there was a recent congressional hearing on this issue that might be interesting to watch. And auction.com has done some interesting research which aligns with what NCST's own data shows, which is that while many properties are being purchased by investors across all geographies, that what you tend to see in communities of color is that those homes aren't flipped to home buyers necessarily, but are kept as rentals. So even if investor purchases are pretty endemic at this point throughout the market, in certain markets, they're more likely to just be purchased for a quick or maybe not so quick flip to home ownership, whereas in other areas, they're purchased for the purposes of rental.
Yuju, there was another question that came through from Olivia Dobbs. She was asking if you've seen differences in home ownership rates or other factors based on the density of housing stock that's in those locations.
We haven't been able to parse through to that significant level, but that is something that we can consider for future research.
Great. Well, if there aren't any more questions, we can thank Yuju for her really interesting presentation and your time, and segue into our policy update.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Julia, I know you have some thoughts to share with us as well, but first, as Jordan was referencing, if you would provide a policy update on.
Sure, and I don't really have that many thoughts. There's a few different updates I wanted to give today. Before I get into what's happening in Congress or the agencies, I do want to note a really interesting report that came out of the National Association of Realtors this month, a report on homeowner wealth and gains in wealth by homeowners. And what's interesting about this particular report, other than the fact that obviously with the incredible increases in home price appreciation, we've seen pretty significant increases in wealth, is the report addresses this for different income buckets and demonstrates what might be obvious, but it's really important to crunch the numbers on this, which is that the wealthier you are and the more expensive a house you have, the more wealth you've gained during this period of the run-up in home prices. But it does, they've put out sort of they focus on middle income or middle class homeowners. And of course, another takeaway from the report is also not news, but always useful to see the latest numbers, which is while homeowners in lower income bands and with smaller houses didn't gain as much wealth, they still gain more wealth than people who are not homeowners. That still proves true. But I really do recommend the report, which is pretty rich and has a few tidbits in it, just apropos of the conversation we were having a minute ago. We're seeing continued declines in sales of existing homes to first-time homeowners. And a lot of that reflects what's going on with investors in the housing market. So to move to regulatory agencies, just a couple of things that I think is worth talking about. One is, I hope everybody has seen that FHFA announced its contribution this year to the affordable homeownership funds. That's the Housing Trust Fund and the Capital Magnet Fund. It was a record $1.1 billion for these funds. That's from the fee that's levied on new securitizations. And the Capital Magnet Fund, which I know is of particular interest to a lot of folks on this call, actually went up by about 15%. And it's pretty close to 400 million at this point. So, big jump, lots of funding out there. And I think most of you know that NCST's Homeownership Alliance is very focused on working with the folks at Treasury on the Capital Magnet Fund to try to make sure it's, as easy as possible and as supported as possible to use those funds for purposes related to homeownership. So that's an effort that is very high on our priority list right now, given this increase in funding. FHFA has finalized its capital rules, which normally, just seems like a really boring thing that nobody would care about. But the amount of capital that Fannie and Freddie have to hold is, directly related to the pricing of loans. It is not the end all and be all of pricing, because capital levels are sort of what you might call enterprise wide, while FHFA and the GSEs can use pricing to sort of cross subsidize within what they're doing. And, you know, there's a lot of control over how different loans are priced. We're seeing, you know, most advocacy organizations, including NCST, are focused on trying to improve pricing for folks who may have a lower amount to spend on a down payment or who may have a lower FICO score. So that work is continuing. The big news this month, of course, was that the omnibus passed earlier in March. So there is actually a government budget, which is a great thing instead of kicking the can down the road with these, you know, 3-week CRs all the time. And the exciting news from this latest omnibus is that the HUD budget has increased by $5 billion, a little more than $5 billion, which is fantastic. It was unfortunately not as much as the House of Representatives would have increased it by, but you know, you had to bargain with the Senate. Some particular sub numbers that might be of interest to this group. The home budget is up 11%. Now the CDBG budget is down by 4%. So that's a little bit of an anomaly. The biggest winners in this budget, really by far the biggest winner, is the Choice Neighborhoods program, which it had its budget increased by 75%. I know a lot of you come from cities where there are neighborhoods participating in the Choice Neighborhoods program. So that is, you know, something that HUD is betting on. And also housing for elderly and people with disabilities has been increased relatively significantly. You know, that's obviously a huge need in many of the places you live. So there, you know, we don't know what's happened. We don't know what's going to happen next with Congress with respect to the legislation formerly known as the Build Back Better Act. Negotiations are ongoing. And, you know, as you know, NCST has been incredibly focused on both the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act and also the Community Revitalization Fund. We don't know what's going to happen. We continue to work with other housing and consumer groups to advocate for these programs. The good news on neighborhood homes is that even if there's not another spending bill that gets passed that addresses these issues, we are still going to need to do tax legislation at some time this year. And that is where neighborhood homes would live because it's a tax program rather than a spending program. So the Neighborhood Homes Coalition, which many of you participate in, is proceeding apace and really continuing to keep the pressure on. I've been really struck by how many various conversations I find myself in where attention continues to be paid to that bill by, let's just say, by like not us. You know, that it really has, the idea has really, I think, come into more broad view by more and more stakeholders. And so I remain optimistic that something happens with that legislation at some point. And again, you know, since that legislation is focused on places where there's this value gap, we know that because of the huge home price gains, there are many places that had a value gap before that don't have one anymore. And that will make it even that much easier to target this program, if it gets created, to the neighborhoods that really are in need and continue to struggle with the fact that you know, rehabbing a home, acquiring and rehabbing a home, or a new infill is more expensive than you can sell the house for, or that it will appraise for. Beyond beyond legislation, I know people are always asking us about inventory. Now we've started to see a lot of numbers with respect to foreclosures. As you know, the foreclosure moratoria all basically ended at the end of the year. There are still some state or local moratorium situations, but largely foreclosures have begun to proceed. What we saw in January and February was that those foreclosures mostly happened either on vacant properties or on properties that were already delinquent pre-COVID. So you're not yet starting to see any foreclosures come through, or many foreclosures come through, of folks that took out a forbearance because of a COVID-related hardship. We continue to watch that. That said, with the foreclosures that have started, and in January we saw about a 7-fold increase in foreclosure starts, which sounds enormous, but it's still lower than the before times. So we are going to start to see some more inventory out there in the market, probably not that much yet through NCST's REO match, because a lot of the stuff we'll see was, more of the forbearance, people affected by COVID bucket. But it's, it's still going to be a tough inventory slog out there for a long time. And NCST continues to be interested in hearing from you on what that means for you, where you're finding inventory. We're like turning over every rock we can to see what else we can find and ways that we can bring it to you. I think, we keep experimenting. Some of those experiments don't work as well. Hopefully some will. And we will sort of continue at that, because we know that inventory is key to the acquisition and rehab work that we're doing. And I think with that, Jordan, we can open up for any questions, and we certainly have time to answer as many as people have.
Yeah, anyone who has questions, feel free to use the Q&A functionality. Oh, it looks like we do have one from Courtney Schneider. Julia, can you explain what happened with the Zillow properties?
Well, I wish I could explain what happened to the Zillow properties. That was an example of an opportunity we tried our best to jump on. To be honest, Zillow wasn't super interested in a neighborhood positive outcome necessarily. What we saw happen was that in many cases, the bids that came in from you guys were outbid. In other cases, we don't know the final disposition yet. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that at some point some of these properties do come back for some kind of second look, but we're not there yet. At NCST, we are going to do some title tracking to try to see what happened to that slug of homes that went onto the market when Zillow shut down its iBuying network, because we're very interested. We think that will tell us a lot about what the landscape looks like out there and what competition looks like. So hopefully we'll do sort of a mini report on that, but that's down the road, because unless we get the data from inside Zillow, which is not likely, we need to wait for the data to be publicly available.
Julia, I would only add to that. First off, Courtney from County Corp in Dayton, really appreciate you raising the question, and would only add that all of us in NCST are grateful that groups like yours and other markets that were involved in that effort participated as much as you did, and providing your questions and feedback even into the future is invaluable for us. So thank you.
All right, looks like we have two more questions here. One from Krishna saying the Port of Cincinnati recently issued bonds to acquire close to 200 homes from an out-of-town investor that went into receivership. Have you seen other examples of local governments buying back homes from these types of investors?
Well, I may also call on Chris Garland for part of this answer too. I will say this, there are many local governments who for years have had some way of, putting, the properties that had persistent code violations into receivership and then auctioning those properties off. Baltimore is kind of a national model of that. And, I think an increasing number of localities are looking at the ability to take those homes with the persistent code violations and get them away from the investors who aren't paying attention to them. But Chris, I'm wondering if you, or if anybody else on the webinar today has seen specific examples of what Cincinnati's doing, which is, I think a very, very creative response to this problem.
All that I could say is I share that sentiment. It really is an exciting approach. One of the, as a lot of folks may be aware, one of the novel aspects of the way that Cincinnati's community development network is structured is that a key part of it, operates out of the Port Authority. And so that ability to issue bonds and leverage those resources and marry it with a housing and community development program effort is really a unique infrastructure. Having said that, many communities have comparable agencies where they could leverage those. And I know that there's live conversations in other communities, particularly in Ohio, centered around, wow, how could we potentially capitalize on, on a tax flow from that? Only thing I'd add is perhaps since there's interest already out there, this might be a key for us on a future community impact briefing call to invite our partners from the Cincinnati Port to discuss this a little bit further.
Excellent, thanks, Chris. Beverly asked, what do you think about allowing nonprofits access to the down payment assistance and repair budgets under FHFA to lower the cost of acquisition of properties in this bid war?
So I'll be honest, I'm not sure exactly what budgets you're referring to. Fannie and Freddie do have programs. They offer two kinds of products that you might be referring to. One is low down payment products, Home Ready and Home Possible, that are for families under 80% of the area median income to be able to do, acquire a low down payment mortgage at good pricing. But FHFA itself doesn't have a down payment assistance program. Fannie and Freddie also have what we call renovation mortgage options, where if a homeowner is seeking to buy a home that needs repair, they can obtain a mortgage for greater than the current value of the home, so that they can have enough cash to go ahead and do those repairs that are necessary for the home to be move-in ready. Both Fannie and Freddie are focused on trying to get those products out into the marketplace. NCST has been working for a while, and some of you may be part of this, on starting to pilot a program where nonprofits can play a critical role with those Fannie and Freddie renovation mortgages, as well as the more long-standing FHA 203K type mortgages, where we would pair up, or a nonprofit could work to pair up a home buyer or an aspiring home buyer with a nonprofit, so the nonprofit could work as the contractor, as the general contractor on the job, And there is a way we might do this where that would enable the nonprofit to help acquire, that inventory. For NCST's own inventory, we would be interested in adding that as a potential, permissible way to purchase our inventory. Though right now, that's not super relevant since we don't have that much inventory. But that's absolutely a topic NCST is actively working on right now, and would be happy to talk more about. But I guess if I completely got wrong what you were asking, maybe you can clarify for me.
And in the meantime, we can turn to David Feldman for the last question in the Q&A. What lessons are we able to learn from the NSP experience acquiring foreclosed homes from lenders to put into NSP for renovation and resale to homeowners?
So it's a great question. A great deal of ink has been spilled on this question over the years. I definitely refer you to Mr. Google for a lot of reports, but there have been, I would say the most well-known evaluation report of NST came out of a consulting group called Abt Associates, ABT. But what's interesting is the Abt report came out very equivocal. I have seen numerous reports from either individual cities or individual nonprofits working in cities that really drill down into the work that was done as a result of the NSP acquisition and rehab program. And they've actually found much more positive results. And that really comports more with what I feel like I've seen on the ground personally, that any program that enables nonprofits, or for that matter, more mission-focused for-profits who are working in, more distressed neighborhoods and working more to flip houses for homeownership as opposed to just holding them for rental. I would say in anywhere where you see that work get to any kind of scale, and scale doesn't mean hundreds and hundreds. Scale can mean a couple dozen. You do start to see positive spillover effects for that community. And there's lots of folks, lots of our local partners have written reports on this. Off the top of my head, I know some good reports have come out of ANDP in Atlanta, and Chris, I think a few in Ohio as well, and I think maybe Chicago. And there's a lot of data on Detroit as well. So I don't think it's a question of necessarily having to demonstrate so much that it works, as just that it's really challenging work right now in this inventory constrained and investor saturated environment. And that's why NCST believes that one of the most effective approaches to help that inventory be available is sort of, exclusive either first look programs or subsidies that in exchange for the receipt of a subsidy require that something be made available for homeownership, owner occupancy only. We're doing that with our Dash Fund in Baltimore, which is a capital fund aimed at small developers that are rehabbing in some of the, tougher areas to redevelop in Baltimore. And what we find is if you offer a program that allows people access to capital at a, at a fair rate under very favorable terms, they will come even if you say the requirement is that the home be sold to an owner occupant. And these may be the only way, that this competition with investors is tough. And if you're just competing on price, it can be very, very hard because when you're dealing with an auction situation and you get bid up beyond where you know you really should be, you can't do the work. You can't do the work and keep yourself in business. So there's got to be another way. And NCST, I would say this is the speech we give the most frequently to every policymaker that we talk to, because this is, you can say this is a market issue, but this is also really a housing policy issue, and how we want to see housing look. Do we want to see home ownership continue to grow, particularly among the communities that have much lower rates of homeowners than white communities do? Or do we want to just say, okay, forget it, we'll just be like a lot of other countries where homeownership isn't that widespread? Well, I haven't talked to anyone who says the latter out loud, but lots of times the policies sure make it seem like that's what they want. And so, we're out there trying to make the argument that, this isn't just you have to deal with some of the market issues, but what outcomes do we want for our neighborhoods? Do we want high home ownership neighborhoods that, which we know have so much, so much to say for other, positive outcomes that come from that kind of home ownership, whether it's education or health or safety, et cetera. So, it's just really important that we all keep being out there and be visible with the work we're doing and tell those success stories and look at the neighborhoods where we're working and try to figure out what are the indicia of success that we can bring to the attention of those policymakers. Sorry, that was a long answer, but I feel passionately about this.
Well, and in truth, Julia, I don't think that any remarks could have better bookended today's CIP call. So well said.
So, I will, wait, there's something, okay. I just want to say one more thing before we close here, which is, as everyone on this call knows, I was nominated last year to become the FHA commissioner in the Biden administration. While I have still not been confirmed, which is why I'm still here, I would say the logjam may be starting to break, and I am hoping for confirmation, within the next quarter or, hopefully as soon as possible. So I did want to say, it is possible that this could be the last SIB call that I'm on. And, in case it is, I do want to say that, first of all, it's, been an amazing experience to be here at NCST for the past 6.5 years with this amazing team of people who just know so much and work so hard and have, all through the pandemic, even as we've had no inventory, trying to pivot to other things we can do to be of service. But I also want to say that at whatever time I make it into HUD, whether I make it in by being confirmed to the commissioner job or, end up there in some more kind of acting position if the confirmation doesn't happen, I want to encourage everybody to still be in touch with me and to, it's so easy when you're in a policy-making position to get disconnected from the field and what's happening. And, I'll look to all of you to help that not happen. So thanks in advance for that.
Well, thank you, Julia, for all of your insights today, your answers to our very thoughtful questions, and just for everything. As I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, and we will circulate that recording later this week to everybody who attended this call. So with that, thanks to everyone who came today, and look forward to seeing you next month. Bye.
Thank you.